Welcome back to the Super Data Science Podcast, everybody. Super excited to have you back here on the show. And today we've got a special guest calling in from Long Island, New York, Art Shectman. Art, how are you going today?
Great. Thanks for having me on. This is going to be fun.
Excited to have you on. And you'll be, maybe surprised to know you're the first guest who is doing the podcast standing with me. We're both standing up right now. This is awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah, we talked a bit about it before the show. Tell our listeners, I've been trying to drive this message across. I even recorded like a short episode for the podcast with a chiropractor on why standing up is good for you. Like, when did you start standing and how has it changed your life?
Oh, man. So this is an interesting story. So my great aunt, Vera, is, she's going to be mad at me. She's 90 years old. And she's a professor of piano pedagogy. So now she's retired, but she lifelong piano teacher.
Yeah.
And she got into ergonomics and like repetitive strain injuries to like help musicians who had injuries over time, like rehabilitate themselves and keep playing their instruments.
Yeah.
And so she learned a bunch about ergonomics. She was always hounding me like, you have to have the proper chair. It has to have a low back and a seat pan tilt adjustment and height adjustment. And that's it. No arms. And she would beat me if I had arms on my chairs. And she was like, it has to be this high. The monitor has to be this way and whatever. So, at the company, we like had to buy those kinds of chairs. Like I couldn't, like I was having post-traumatic chair stress. And anyway, so we were really sensitive to ergonomics and making sure people had good setups and whatever. And then, as you get on sitting in the computer all the time, your posture suffers and like you lose a lot of flexibility in your hips and like your shoulders start to round and whatever. It's bad news for posture. And one of our folks, her husband actually had started standing up and he was just raving about it. He's like, I feel great. My posture's improved. I can't sit down now. It's like, that's crazy. And I'd been reading about all the health benefits. So about, I don't know, now 2.5 years ago, I started standing up and it was amazing. To everyone out there, try it. Definitely buy a gel mat. That is the one thing that will make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
But it's great. I mean, it was fantastic. I like snowboarding. It just did fantastic differential diagnosis of like pre-stand up, terrible sucking wind. My legs were killing me snowboarding. And then post standing up, like a year later, I could do whatever I want to do. And my posture's improved and I feel more flexible. It's great for core strength. And it's just awesome. And it's a no-brainer. It's really, after the first 2-3 months, you don't even notice you're doing it. And
the first 3 months are the hardest, right?
Yeah.
I went through that recently. I've been doing it for 5 months, first 3 months. Like you just want to sit down all the time. Your back hurts and so on. But then after that, just like, it's natural, right?
Yeah. I remember when I was like 16 or 17, one of my first jobs was being an usher at a movie theater. Yeah. And you would just be on your feet walking through the movie theater all day or taking tickets or whatever. And you were just standing the whole day.
Yeah.
And I just remember the first couple of weeks of that job, I was like in pain and sore. And I was like, man, my feet are killing me. And so now I'm a lot older than that. And it's definitely like 3 months, not like 3 weeks of adjustment.
Yeah.
But the gel mat, like that takes pressure off your knees and gives you kind of a reason to activate your core and move around while you're standing. Yeah. That helped me a lot, but totally worth it.
Awesome. Well, good suggestion for people to check it out. Welcome. Excited to talk. We've got quite a bit of things to cover about the things that you do in the data space and it'll be exciting for me as well, because like in a certain way, because I am excited to learn about what you do. And I think you're on a very relevant topic these days about digital transformations and helping the world in this technology space. For somebody who hasn't heard about your company before or doesn't know what you do, how do you describe what your company is? Maybe introduce your company for us, please, and also what your role is there.
Sure. I would. My role is easy. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer, which means from a servant leadership standpoint, I do everything that no one else has yet been trained or hired to do.
Yeah.
Which luckily for me, I have a fantastic team. So these days, it's the fun stuff and not so much of the super heavy lifting. Elephant Ventures is a digital innovation and transformation company.
Hmm.
We were founded 17 years ago,
Hmm.
and we focus on helping either early stage startups or innovation practices in large corporations
Hmm.
to materialize their ideas faster. We
Hmm.
have a methodology we developed over the last 17 years that we call dependable innovation. And in
Hmm.
fact, dependability is at the top of our corporate values pyramid. Um, and really, we help people go from early stage ideation and how they vet and think about ideas to the the kind of concept of idea refinement and how you prototype early and then go build prototypes and get to business value. Our whole
Hmm.
focus is about how do you go from an idea to delivered business value in
Uh-huh.
the innovation or adjacency space where you're trying to transform an existing system or do something new with new tools.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. I hope you're enjoying this episode. We'll get back to it after this quick break. And the Confident Data Skills Edition 2 is out. This is the second edition of the book I published in 2018. Some time has passed since then. A lot of things have changed in the space of artificial intelligence and data science. If you're not familiar with the book, then it helps develop an understanding of all of the main data science algorithms and the data science process on an intuitive level. So no code, no complex mathematics, just intuitive explanations of the algorithms and useful practical examples and case studies. This book will be extremely helpful for you if you're starting out or if you're looking to cement in that intuitive feeling for the algorithms as you progress through your career. Specifically, you will learn about decision trees, random forests, k-nearest neighbors, naive Bayes, logistic regression, k-means clustering, hierarchical clustering, reinforcement learning, upper confidence bound, and Thompson sampling. And in this second edition, I also added robotic process automation, computer vision, natural language processing, reinforcement learning and deep learning, and neural networks. Plus, of course, you will learn extremely valuable skills for your career, such as ethics in AI, presentation skills, data science interview tips, and much more. So if you want to get a grip and really cement in your intuitive understanding of this field, then this is the book for you. And you can get it on Amazon already today. It's called Confident Data Skills Edition 2, and it's a purple book. So enjoy, and let's get back to the podcast. There's plenty of ideas out there, right? But it's about executing. And on the other hand, we were chatting before the podcast, there's plenty of companies that have a lot of data scientists executing, but most of those projects don't see the light of day. So I guess it's about putting the right ideas with the right execution to get results.
Yeah. So we have this framework we call our data to decision accelerator,
Mhm.
and we have a kind of a technology pattern that we call our data driven innovation kind of pattern.
Mhm.
And it's around that core concept, exactly what you mentioned, that there's a lot of data. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people doing data science, a lot of people doing data engineering. But somewhere, somehow, you have to thread that through with the concept of business value. You have to achieve a business result somehow. You either have to be reducing risk, changing capital allocations, capturing markets, developing revenue, creating insights. But even that is not enough. If you just take an idea of a way to get some data somewhere, do some modeling or analytics, get it surfaced to a dashboard and create insights for people, you haven't captured any business value. You've given people the understanding of how they might capture business value, but you didn't actually get it captured. And so what we're finding in the current environment is the cycles for digital transformation, the cycle time for patience, for the kind of return on innovation to get your data science team to produce something for you. It's shorter. People are less patient. They need results in 90 days, not 9 months. And until you actually take the insight and get it into the operational fabric of your business and get it consumed and implemented, you don't actually get any business value out of the investments you've made. And so we help people both at the early stage of the ideas get leading indicators, whether or not the thing is going to create business value, or at least have a theory about how they'll adopt it and create business value from it. And then a suite of practices and tools that rapidly move you along that process. So this data to decision accelerator process is meant to look at your data help you apply design thinking and like lean product development practices, or all of our innovation background, towards very focused data product development or data insight development that help you as a company get to a decision and then implement workflows and things that allow you to take action on that decision.
Okay, gotcha. Can you give us an example? So, like, I conceptually understand the area where you would be applying your skills and what kind of direction you help companies move in. But a concrete example would be very useful to understand. Oh, okay, that's exactly what you guys do.
Sure. So let's say you're in the retail space right
Mhm.
now, and you're trying to decide where to open and close retail operations,
Yeah.
or you're struggling with the mixture of kind of where you balance inventory or supply chain aspects
Mhm.
of how you're supplying your stores, or even a manufacturing operation. Right now, you have some pretty big challenges. You have some pretty big disruptions based on the shift in how people are purchasing, where they're purchasing, where they're spending, everything else.
Yeah.
And so, in a good example, um, let's say that data that's coming from the markets is impacting people with corporate loans. We work with an industry organization called Global Credit Data that has a centralized database of large corporate and all kinds of different asset classes of loans.
Mhm.
And banks are, through their regulations, necessarily obligated to have certain capital reserves. And so we're working with them to create kind of lean conduits for information from
Mhm.
the banks to report on their non-performing loans,
Mhm.
looking at ways with them of how do you take an idea of how you merge that with market data, real-time data,
Mhm.
and then create insights for banks to change the way that they're configuring their portfolios and maintaining their balance sheets.
Mhm.
At times that could mean a shift in the capital reserve that a bank keeps on their balance sheet. They could free up tens of millions of dollars and put it to work productively elsewhere.
Mhm.
Other times it could mean real-time signaling of things to remove from their balance sheet that they should submit
Mhm.
to a marketplace to sell off. But that's a sort of maybe a poor choice of a case study.
Mhm.
But the point, I guess, is that there's a need to integrate data rapidly.
Mhm.
There's a need to understand how that data relates to itself and create some type of common data model or common data fabric that allows you to understand the data that you have. And then you develop analytics and sort of insight generation on that. And then you have to rapidly be able to plug those insights into some operational system. And
Mhm.
so, that takes the form in all kinds of different places. There's work we've done with public data sets and kind of correlating public health data sets or public governmental information and procurement data sets,
Mhm.
where you want to be able to correlate those things, do some entity resolution between all the different players that you're seeing in those data sets, and then allow people to make strategic decisions on the integrated data model that you see. And anyone who's saying, hey, we have a bunch of data, or we're going to get some new data, or thinking about buying data from a third party, you have to ask the question, like, why? What are we hoping to achieve? What
Mhm.
is the business value? What's the outcome for our business if we purchase this data? What does it do for us?
Mhm.
And so we help people think through that process, create a prioritization framework of what they're trying to achieve,
Mhm.
understand clearly what the business value is they're trying to deliver once they've integrated that data, and then help them build the kind of engineering pipelines and analytical tools that get them to the ultimate insight. And then the final step being, okay, now you have the insight. How do you change the workflow of your organization to do something about
Mhm. Okay, how is the work you do different to consulting?
it? Good question. I would say it is consulting.
Mhm.
There's a small dimension of what we do where we develop venture foundry type
Mhm.
applications or products. So we form our own ventures, and sometimes we partner with data interested early stage venture capital firms to help them build some of their platform to
Mhm.
actually move their data engineering kind of chops along, so that when they're investing in things in the early stage, we can help them rapidly get their MVPs into market.
Mhm.
I'd say we look a lot more like a partner
Mhm.
and a venture foundry in our consulting footprint, but
Mhm.
at our core, we are consultants.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, gotcha. Um, and what are the typical industries that you work with?
Lots of public sector stuff, tons of healthcare experience. Here and there, financial institutions as well. Like we're working with an early stage
Mhm,
kind of neobank right now to help them inflate
mhm,
their operations from basically idea and pitch deck stage to a fully operational bank, leveraging a bunch of the fintech platforms that are out there today. That'll
mhm,
take us probably 120 days to inflate a bank from scratch.
mhm. Well, okay, gotcha. So public sector, healthcare, banks. Do you have any case studies from the healthcare sector? Given the current situation in the world, be very interesting to hear what kind of services companies require in these days.
Yeah, there's a little bit of I have to filter my answer a tiny bit,
Hmm.
just in deference to the kind of disclosure agreements with some of our customers.
Yeah.
But the general need right now is for understanding uh, how current healthcare strains and demands are impacting the footprint of where you're making investments, and then what regional healthcare operators and systems can do to better
Uh-huh.
serve their population, and looking at some of the social determinants or behavioral segmentation of how people's health is currently being impacted. I
Uh-huh.
think the dialogue has shifted from tracking and observing where people are disproportionately being affected by the pandemic
Mhm.
to what do we do once the virus is here? Like
Yeah.
what's going to happen next? Um, sorry, once the vaccine is here,
Yeah.
what's going to
Vaccine.
happen next? Um, and I think so. There's some amount of that as a current observation, but generally speaking, I think healthcare data is uh, very messy,
Uh-huh.
and it's a struggle for most providers or operators or payers to get it all integrated, to get into a place where they can consult it. Um, and then there's a ton of domain knowledge that's needed to
Mhm.
understand what you're looking at to then help people make decisions about it.
Mhm. Okay. Speaking of messy data, is that a common common thing you encounter when like the data is not high quality and your team has to spend a lot of time preparing it?
Sure. That's a fantastic question. So, data is always messy.
Hmm.
Anytime data comes from an external source that you don't control, um, or touches human beings, or human beings are involved in the process of
Yeah.
aggregating or entering or collecting the data, it becomes messy.
Uh-huh.
And I would say our experience has been that standard data scientists, they're going to spend 2-3 weeks developing a model, 6 to 7 months developing clean data and dealing with data hygiene so they can actually test or train the model,
Yeah.
and then another 6 or 7 months dealing with production issues and DevOps and deployment pipelines and ML ops to get their model deployed. And
Uh-huh.
something like 70 or 80% of the initiatives fail because they
Uh-huh.
just never make it through that cycle. But the starting point is data hygiene, and data quality. It
Uh-huh.
actually it brings me to an interesting point about data quality and data quality engineering.
Uh-huh.
Out of our venture foundry about 7 years ago, we launched a social impact venture called Ultranauts. We employ
Hmm.
folks on the autism spectrum as software testers, and we have this awesome new data quality engineering practice that's been launched by our new kind of our new VP of strategy. I forget her exact title, but Nicole Radswell is this amazing woman who has a fantastic long record in kind of understanding machine learning, data science, data quality, quality engineering, general consulting, and transformation services. She's amazing. But
Uh-huh.
Ultra has this burgeoning practice around quality engineering services on the
Uh-huh.
data side, so data quality engineering.
Uh-huh.
And really, what we're seeing out everywhere is folks are integrating all kinds of new data. They're having trouble assessing whether or not the data feeds are worth integrating. They're having trouble understanding in their own data what is the kind of statistical profiling of their data, and where do they need to be concerned? What kinds of decisions should they be able to make based on the quality of the data? And then once you operationalize something, there's always drift. So how are you monitoring for that? How are you checking? How are you making sure that your assumptions are still valid that you built your models on? And so there's this whole space that is coupled to this idea of using data to make decisions, where you also have to make sure the data still has quality, or has quality before it gets in the door, or that you've cleaned up all the random internal data that you have and created some type of known framework of what's in there and how to use it. But Ultranauts is a super cool company. Like I said, it's about 7 years old. We say we're out there demonstrating that cognitive diversity is a competitive advantage. About 75% of the company is on the autism spectrum, and it's just great. We really have found some magical, what we call kind of inclusive practices where you embrace neurodiversity, and we're kind of what we call this universal workplace we're designing, where we're figuring out how to employ cognitively diverse teams. And
Wow,
ultimately, we release some of our findings to the world and share our practices to inspire other folks to do the same.
that's amazing. And it's a great example as well. This data knots, the neurodiversity companies like that. Elephant Ventures is just not just a consulting firm. Sometimes, as you said, you partner up with people and you create companies. I wanted to ask you a bit more about data quality engineering. So,
sure.
To somebody who's listening to this, who wants to start a startup, or maybe who is already running a company, what is your advice in terms of data quality engineering? How can they, what's the one takeaway that you can give them right now that they can go and do differently in their company, whether it's a startup or an existing enterprise, that will help them with data quality engineering?
Man, the one prize pearl of wisdom. The thing that I think is more important is the precursor to data quality. Mm-hmm. In terms of understanding what your data catalogs look like, mm-hmm. like what you're actually ingesting, because it's almost like, if you have a mixed bag of fruit, you have apples, you have oranges, you have, a couple of rocks that looked red, and you have this like a tomato, which I guess is a fruit. You don't really know what you have. And so how do you know, do I have quality fruit? Do I have quality apples? Well, or it's sort of...
Do I have quality rocks?
Do I have quality rocks that are painted red? And so there's a lot of work, I think, that goes into understanding the data as it's coming in. Yeah. And almost like the custodial aspects of data hygiene. Mm-hmm. Like what's there? What is populated? What's not? Mm-hmm. What is variant? What has the same type of field formatting or the same type of data type? What's the breadth of the coverage inside of all the fields that you have? Are they always, are they drifting? Is the profiling of your data different than it was before? There's really easy ways on the data custodial side to start the process and just know what you actually have. And then there's a secondary layer in the same vein of like knowing what you have. If you don't understand the data itself, like what it's useful for, it's harder to understand whether or not you like what you need to build a program around quality engineering. Mm-hmm. Because if there are some things you can do statistically and stochastically that don't really depend on a core business understanding of what it is you're dealing with. Yeah. Other things, it's more important to then build on top of a solid, clean data framework and an understanding of your catalogs to then figure out, okay, how am I empowered or how am I set up to be able to make the kinds of decisions or use the type of data feeds in models or data streams for my business? So understanding what the data is applying to or how it's being consumed is almost like the second order step of data quality engineering. The first step is like knowing what you have and making sure that it's the custodial aspects of ingesting it and kind of integrating different systems into a common data mart or data fabric that you have some baseline of quality there. So I would say start at the custodial level. And once you're comfortable with what you have, then you can move into the second order stuff where it's really understanding how it's impacting your business. But I guess maybe the eye on the prize is like, don't do the custodial stuff just to do the custodial stuff. Yeah. Also have some semblance or idea of progression that says, I know where I'm going to capture business value ultimately. Like I know what quality I'm trying to drive. I'm baking apple pies. That's why I need good apples.
Okay, gotcha. It's especially relevant for enterprises, large companies, where they have so many different sets of data and different storage facilities where they don't know, nobody knows what kind of data they have. So I think it would be very valuable what you're saying for a company to go in and do like an audit of what is all the data that we have, put a list together. How long
Yep.
does, in your experience, does that usually take?
It's funny. I have a friend who is in the data engineering group at a very large pharmacy company, and
Yeah.
we have this data-driven innovation pattern
Mm,
where very rapidly, in the span of 60 or 90 days, we can go from the idea of a product to implementing this pattern and kind of an offshoot from your core corporate data engineering pipelines and data fabric, and get you to an answer and surface it through a GraphQL API to whatever kind of application you want in a fairly fault and change tolerant way. Like it's built, it's this pattern that's built to like plug into any kind of data in whatever format it's on, wherever it
mhm.
lives, mangle it together into a common data model, do the hygiene and custodial stuff you need, get it surfaced to an API so you can start making decisions rapidly.
Yeah.
And we talked him through this pattern. He's like, this looks awesome and it's fantastic,
Yeah.
except most of my days right now are spent just trying to figure out like these three fields have a 5% deviation sometimes because we acquired 47 other pharmacies and some one of the 15 pharmacy order fulfillment tracking systems we use didn't get the memo on some data update to our collective schema from
Yeah.
6 months ago or a year ago. And I spend 4 months trying to convince them to just comply or update the way that they're, handling data and make a change to whatever internal systems. So the time constant of the standard giant enterprise change or
Mm,
like the way that they get started in some of these programs, they are fighting monumental battles to get tiny changes made. And so
mm,
sometimes when you're looking in the kind of data driven innovation space or transformation space where you need rapid turnarounds and you don't have that much time, you need to kind of build an offshoot to the core data fabric or core data engineering or data ops group. Hit the measure that you need, prove that you've created business value, and then do the monolithic battle of getting that refactored back into your core operational fabric. It's an interesting pickle. He was like, these are super exciting tools. I would love to be able to use them, but my day right now is fighting with someone to update a super old system and change three fields to have the new configuration we want. And it's been a 90-day discussion just to get it added to their backlog. And then that might be another 8 months until they actually implement it. So the reality of some of this stuff is, okay, knowing that that's happening, how do you build a rapid response system that can just do the translation you need there or the transformations you need and catalog and maintain those kind of hygiene customization transforms or scripts that deal with moving those things around or refactoring data so you can actually take advantage of it until the ultimate, you know, initial system change gets made.
Okay. Talk us through this pattern that your colleague was very impressed by.
Oh yeah, so we leveraged an open source tool from the Apache Foundation called Apache NiFi. It
Huh?
basically has a library of a handful of hundreds of pre-built connectors, a pretty rich development community, and it's sort of like the data get it from anywhere package. It's standard kind of ETL tool,
Mm,
but it's
mhm.
built on the Zookeeper pattern for elastic scalability. So when you want to deal with data streams or you want to scale it up massively or distribute the load of jobs, you totally can. But simple things like retrieving files, talking to APIs, talking to databases, getting some data out, it's really good at that. And then it has a good compromise between writing your own custom Python scripting to do all this stuff, or some clicky dev, you know, simple user ETL package that is frustrating and doesn't do everything you want to do. It has a really good way of storing these kind of process chains and process groups and processors of how your data gets moved around, and it has some visualizations of that. So you don't have to be a super in the weeds, hands-on software engineer to be able to modify it or change it or figure out what's going on. And it has really cool things like resumability. It has data provenance built in, so you can tell what's happening with your data all along the way. And so we leverage that to very rapidly just grab whatever data feeds we need from wherever. The default conversation when we meet headwinds is like, look, can you export it to a file and just
Yeah.
get it somewhere for us? Great, we'll grab that and we'll deal with it.
Huh.
And escalating from there in complexity for programmatic access or spinning up elastic containers that have to run a certain type of client to get to certain type of secure data sources, whatever, it'll handle it. And so we do that. We get it to a rapid kind of ingested core hygiene scripted transformed common data model and say, okay, here's the core data set we need. And then we use a tool called PostGraphile, which is an interpreter of the structures of the ultimate common data model we produce. And it surfaces, it generates GraphQL endpoints. So we have this thing we call the instant API pattern. As long as you change the data model and register the changes in the data model, and you've designed your kind of core data structures well, it will pick up and automatically write the API for you. So like the days of maintaining API code for us are over. We just use this pattern where you go files from anywhere, go through NiFi, get it through into PostGraphile, into a Postgres database or equivalent, and ta-da, you have an API. And then we've got other patterns around kind of like usually React or D3 dashboarding components or custom workflow development that can talk to that API. And as soon as the data is in the database, then you can consume it in your dashboards or front end applications or workflow applications. And so really, we've orchestrated the whole thing. We can turn it on in the cloud for people very rapidly. We could show up and 30, 60, 90 days later, you've got a functional data mart dealing with data changes, ETL kind of transforming into whatever you need. And then it's surfaced into a secured API where you can build applications and kind of consume it to get to value. And it's been super helpful for us. We have this methodology around like this dependable innovation thing I was talking about before, where it's sort of 17 years of collected learnings of like how to do innovation properly and make sure we're mitigating risk for our customers and getting products to done very rapidly. And so as we looked at the amount of projects we were doing that involved data over the last 4 or 5 years, we have thought of like, okay, well, we've done all this lean product development. We've done all this kind of, we use the Google Ventures design sprint pattern to help people take ideas and move them into actionable things and vet it with customers within like a 5-day process. So we said, okay, well, what does this look like for data-driven product? It's like design thinking for data, design sprints for data-driven products. How do we take our innovation practices that are very close to the concept of like rapid transformation services? I wrote this thing called like digital transformation on steroids at ridiculous speed, which is essentially what innovation was typically called. But we take this pattern and like we ingest all your stuff. We get it into a common confrontable model. We put it in a database, and you can either run analytical packages and deposit more processed outputs into that data store, or you can spin up either workflow or dashboardy type pipelines to confront it through an API, or you can link systems with the API. But it's fully baked, so we don't have to make any of those decisions along the way architecturally. We just turn it on, and then we start actually working on, okay, where's the data? Can we get it moving? Let's run the analytics. Let's see if there's actual business outcome there, business value there for you. And so a bunch of the plumbing stuff by leveraging this pattern gets compressed down, which might take you 3 to 6 months to develop on your own. We turn it on in a handful of weeks, and we get right to the part where we're actually trying to iterate on the analytical model or talk to the data providers or provisioning systems that are sending data to us to correct attributes or expand the data sets to actually get to value. And we try to shrink that whole cycle between the consumption or viewing of value and the provision of data.
Okay. Wow. Right. My mind is boiling right now. This is, I'm finally realizing this is very interesting. Like in the sense, like what it actually is. So my understanding is correct that what you guys do is kind of like a end-to-end data pipeline with, and another way of looking at it is like it's auto ML, but with an added back end of getting everything first into the system, ingesting ETL, all the preparation, and then auto ML built on top of that. Is that about right?
I wouldn't say it's auto ML. I think, but yeah, the idea of like all of the plumbing and getting it in there, dealing with data hygiene, getting it transformed, getting into a confrontable common data model, and then having pre-selected patterns to be able to get the data out of the database to your analytical frameworks or.
So it's like a pipeline.
It's definitely like a pipeline, and the hand in hand kind of innovation consulting history that we have
Yeah.
helps us launch a project, not just on the plumbing side,
Yeah.
but really like, what are we trying to achieve? What's the business outcome here of all this
That's
data
the
work and
part
all
that
this
I
data
thought was
engineering?
AutoML, but it's like it's more like experience based ML
Yep.
from
Yeah.
your experience.
Yeah. And also just experience based consulting. So
Consulting.
sometimes when people are doing this, uh, doing these kinds of projects, they're just not connected
Yeah.
to what's the priority for the business. What are they trying to
Yeah.
achieve? What's the outcome for the business?
Uh-huh.
And once everybody kind of agrees to what that prioritization is and what the outcome is they're trying to achieve, it's much easier to have very tactical conversations about, hey, listen, I need these 23 fields added from your
Yeah.
feed right like tomorrow. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, I'll get there in 6 months. It's like, no. There's like $30 million of like net profit on the line here. If this thing works, kind of need them next week.
Yeah.
And when you have that kind of clarity of purpose and the value you're trying to capture, the conversations become much clearer.
Uh-huh.
It's not like, hey, I need 300 tables and 4 different files of data things added, and just give me the kitchen sink of everything you have and I'll let you know what I need later, or just give it to me all now because I don't know what I need. It's more like, here's the outcome, here's the data I need, here's how it will drive the outcome. And the conversation efficiency and the implementation efficiency goes up by several orders of magnitude when everybody's aligned to a key business value result.
Yeah. I love that you repeat that even in our conversation. Value. You got to be focused on the business value, and then your conversations will become easier, if anything.
Yeah. I think one of our, we like to describe our data decision accelerator process is helping businesses capture value from data driven decision making. And essentially,
I saw that on your website.
That's it. Like, the differentiator for us is we teach everybody in the company to focus their attention on business value. You're not just building technology for technology's sake. You're not just doing math or data science for data science's sake. There's a purpose. There's a particular business objective, some business value increment you're trying to deliver. And we have all these theories in our dependable innovation framework about there's this cool concept that isn't ours called the innovation valley of death, where there are 3 critical factors that make an innovation live, right? You have time, like market window time and some amount of time to do the thing. You have money, right? Funding for engineering, talent, and whatever you need to make it become real. And then you have political air support. Like, someone somewhere is taking a risk on building this new project and they're supporting you. They're buying you time, they're helping you secure funding, whatever. And you have to shepherd those 3 resources. So we, as kind of a transformation innovation provider, we look at our job as being a good steward of those resources for our client. And I can't make quality decisions about what to do for you, where to cheat, where I can move faster, where I can underbuild on infrastructure, overbuild on features, but rigid features that might have to get refactored later. If I don't understand the business value I'm trying to achieve, I don't know how to make those decisions. And you introduce inefficiency and waste. And if you don't create defensible, differentiated intellectual property that's actually delivered, so delivered, defensible, differentiated, we call it D3 IP. If you don't do that for your client and you don't accumulate enough of that, you don't reach the innovation action potential so that the innovative project you're trying to get into market lives and breathes and like actually succeeds. It's like you're playing Mario Kart and like you're in the time trial, you go around the track and you run out of time before you get to you don't get to go on the next lap because you ran out of time. Yeah. If you run out of the time, political air support, or cash to be able to keep working on the thing, then you don't get to keep doing it. You don't actually get it in market. You don't actually deliver it. Yeah. And so unless you actually deliver business value and get the thing into market, all this investment in people, data scientists, data infrastructure, data feeds, it's all tremendously inefficient and wasteful because you don't actually get anything back from it. And as our consulting practices taught us, and 17 years of being innovation stewards, you have to look at what we call like the cone of reality dispersion. Yeah. Like, what is going to happen? A friend of mine, this guy, Dave Nye, he used to say, job one of leadership. I don't know if this is his quote or not originally, but job one of leadership is make sure everybody's going in the same direction. And job 2 is make sure it's the right direction. So we have this like cone of reality dispersion. Like this is where we are now, like a point in time. And you can imagine this expanding cone out into the future of likely realities. Well, if you have a lot of uncertainty, sort of angle of that cone, like the amount of space and possible realities you have to deal with is vast. So what do you do as an engineer? Like, well, I have to have a system, or I have to have data engineering or the data to deal with all these eventualities. So you overbuild infrastructure. You move really slowly at the start because you have to accommodate all these variable futures.
Okay.
And so if you know the business value you're trying to create, what does that do?
Yeah.
First of all, it gives you a North Star. It makes sure that everyone's pointing in the right direction. But then if you understand the business value really clearly, it narrows the cone of reality dispersion. And essentially, you're planning for less likely realities. And the more you can narrow that cone and the more clear you can be about the business value you're creating, if you think about like the volume inside of that cone from the point of origin outwards towards the goal you want to achieve, you can move faster. Like if each increment of delivered innovation is based on the volume of that cone, you wind up moving faster the narrower that cone is. And you can cheat. You don't have to build that up. I don't need that data file. I just need this one. I don't need that pipeline. I don't need those hygiene routines. I just need this one. And so when you have everyone at every level, every person on your team down to the most junior engineer locked and loaded and like, I get the business value I'm trying to create. I understand the priorities of my business customer. They know where they can move faster and they know where to over-index and invest for the future. And so that makes the efficiency of the spend of time and cost way better. It also makes sure that the effort we're providing creates more D3 IP. So you accumulate more things that are ultimately going to unlock that value that lets your project be successful. And we really do train everybody to say, like, what are you doing? What's the business value it's creating? When we do our sprint reviews and we talk about the tasks and the stories that we're presenting, it always starts with a business value statement. The business value of this delivered story is blah. Here's how we did it. Here's what happened. And we present our work. And that kind of culture makes sure you're constantly looking towards the why of what you're doing from a business value lens, and make sure that ultimately the people that are funding you are getting you kind of, you do your part to get them unlocked business value so that they can do their part to keep investing in kind of product development and the innovative things you want to do that then unlock that value.
Okay, gotcha. Very interesting. So you have I recently read a book, Lean Startup by Eric Rice, and that's one path I know to unlocking, to understanding what your business should be doing, what your customers want through constant experimentation and discussions with customers and getting their feedback on, okay, like this is valuable to me, this is not valuable, and things like that. How does that tie in with your philosophy of, okay, we need to know that business value? Is it like you come into the company and the executive team is you expect them to tell you what is the business value that they're searching, or do you have a methodology to help them understand this business value in the first place?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like it's lean data product development, right? We have this whole data product design sprint process where if you're looking at the Google Ventures has a fantastic process that they call a design sprint. They have this thing called the Sprint Book by Jake Knapp, I think is his name. It's fantastic. It lays out the methodology. So we've taken that methodology and practiced it a bunch in helping folks go from early stage ideation to polishing an idea to vetting that the idea has the best thinking and kind of the expansive thinking of many experts or individual stakeholders, and then building a prototype of that idea that's a reasonable facsimile of the thing you're trying to do and testing it with users. That's a 5-day process. And oftentimes when we meet people, they're unclear what they're trying to achieve. What's their long-term goal? They're unclear what are the core priorities for their business, what they're trying to achieve. And we help them refine that vision. They may have an idea, but it isn't super clear. And so we help them formalize the description of that, help them validate what it is they're trying to achieve. And then they actually are able to close that loop and say, yeah, we put it in front of the end consumer of the idea, the end customer, and they validate it. They said, yeah, we're not just in our echo chamber of our own, like telling ourselves that it's a great idea. It really is a great idea. And that helps launch the roadmap.
Yeah.
for kind of lean product development of what you're trying to do. Like in agile and lean product development, you're always trying to deliver the next most important increment of business value, get feedback from your customers, and or the the ultimate business outcome you're trying to impact with data or analytics, get the data back and close the loop and make sure you're driving the outcome you wanted to drive. And so we help people construct what does that roadmap look like and have a strategy for how that might evolve over a span of 3, 6, or 9 months out. But really, we have a sharp focus on like, what are we going to do for the next 3 sprints? What are we going to do for the next 6 weeks of a roadmap? What are we going to achieve? If we do what we need, if we do what we set out to do 3 sprints from now, what will we have achieved?
Yeah.
And then
Wow.
repeat it and do it again.
Awesome. Love it. Now that you've bombarded me with all this knowledge and like I'm soaking it in, I feel one thing that would really help me is, can you define data engineering? Like now I have all this information. Like, how do you define what is data engineering? Because it sounds like we're talking about data engineering here.
Sure. I think it's a bit of like data product development and data engineering. But data engineering to me is the idea that there are suites of tools that you have that you need to be aware of and need to know how to use them. And it helps you understand where the data lives, how to get it into the places you need to be, how to transform it and deal with hygiene and kind of the real-time operational necessities of either batched or stream data.
Yeah.
And make sure it's reliable and high quality. And so whether it's ETL packages or stream processors or giant distributed data repositories or data fabric kind of data virtualization technologies, it's about the tools of wrangling and presenting data to ultimately to analytical applications.
Would you call yourself a data engineer?
Oh, and I would call myself an engineer.
Okay.
We recruit for a very particular set of skills and kind of aptitude alignment. Just the core engineering problem solving mindset. The kind of hypothesis testing, insane curiosity and passion around solving problems. And so we describe ourselves as engineers.
Gotcha.
We had a cool project back in the day where we actually built an off-the-grid vending machine just because I was a mechanical engineer by training and someone talked to me about an innovation challenge and I was like, yeah, we could build that. So they sent us a vending machine and we rebuilt it in a low energy CO2 dry ice powered way where we basically treated cold like product. But anyway, we're definitely engineering product builders.
Okay, gotcha. And so you define data engineering. What is data product development? How do you define that?
I think the product development side of it starts from what we were talking about before. Understanding the business value that you're going to provide, and then conceiving of the necessary data partnerships, data sources, data engineering tooling, data pipelines, ETL pipelines, and then also the analytical and data science tooling that you're going to need to do something new or differentiated or to help people make decisions. And if you really think about data-driven product development or data product development, you have to go beyond that. It's not enough just to surface the insight. It's also about, okay, let me understand the infrastructure and pre-existing systems you have in your company. Let me understand the workflow of the people who are interacting with those systems and what's possible and what's not possible. And then let me understand how I'm going to get them to adopt the insights that are coming out of this thing. It's really the full life cycle of how do you go from early stage origins and ideas to the underlying data fabric and data engineering substrate that allows you to do data science and kind of analytical decision-making, data-driven decision-making, but then also the workflow, the end last mile of like, okay, we made it, we know what decision we should be making, or we know what actions we should be taking. How do we go from that point to an organization that complies with that? And there's a whole bunch of theories we have around essentially the input impedance of an organization to change and signal, and the output impedance or the kind of output frequency of insight generation. And what we're noticing across the spectrum is that companies are heavily investing in the higher and higher orders of insight and frequency, like super high frequency output recommendations and insights, but they've under-indexed and don't understand terrifically well the input impedance and the kind of capable frequency response their organization can have. Like if I'm someone who has an organization of stores, retail presence, or people or knowledge workers, but I only recompile their model and retrain them once every 6 months.
Uh-huh.
And the insight generation I'm doing for the thing I want, the outcome I want to have, has a frequency of 2 or 3 insights a day, or adjustments that need to be made a day. Those are valueless insights because the input impedance of the mechanism that needs to turn those things into value, that needs to change behavior, it's a mismatch. So if you fail to consider how you ultimately get the insight into practice, the workflow you need to develop to actually consume the insight and get it into action, that's a huge problem. So when I think about data-driven product development and how we take all our lean product development and innovation experience and apply it to these data ecosystems, that's a core differentiator, is being able to go end to end and say, it's not just how do I get data from A to B, it's what is that data for? How does it create data value for my organization? And how will my organization act on the insight I generate from that data?
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah,
It's
been a lot of fun.
Nice, gotcha. Thank you. You also say that we're engineers, we're not the mechanics. What do you mean by that?
If you want a person who knows, I don't know, the subtle file partitioning schemes in somebody's cloud for like how to super tune their Hadoop cluster, like there's a person for you. And that person is awesome, and they have a wealth of experience, and they're super skilled in that thing.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, you need that person with that point solution skill and tons of experience around that thing to get into the super subtle things that only they will know.
Uh-huh.
And that's not our strong suit. Our strong suit is the end-to-end thinking of how you get to value, and then the speed with which we can get you to the origins of that value. So from idea to MVP, that's where we shine.
Okay. If somebody wants to, I want to get a feel for this kind of technical skills. You already mentioned innovation and curiosity and more like qualities that a person needs to possess. But I also want to get a feel for the technical skills that are required in this space, whether it's for somebody who's trying to do the same analysis that you do, but on their own business, or maybe somebody who wants to be employed in a space that is similar to what you do. What are some of the technical skills that you look for in people you hire into either data engineering or the data product development side of things?
The first set of skills, I think, are around, I would say, habits and practices of lifelong learning.
Yeah.
When we interview for passion and curiosity, that's what we're looking for. Is are you ingesting new tech? Are you reading? Yeah. Are you experimenting? Do you have an active GitHub account?
Yeah.
So kind of attribute wise, that's what we're seeking. From a pure technical skills standpoint, we look at things like code structures, coding hygiene. Do you understand SQL in the back end? Do you have other data storage, experiences? Do you understand unit testing? Do you understand DevOps? Do you understand containerization and orchestration? Do you understand how to use source control? Simple kind of computer science 101 kind of concepts.
Yeah.
I think from at least in the data-driven product development side, we look for a little bit richer understanding of data modeling and like the way that you structure questions of the data, and how do you look at a domain, a business domain, when you're talking about business value, and how do you map that to a data domain? Like, how do you properly do that data modeling so that you set yourself up for subsequent success? We've found that at the outset of our projects, we over-index on the data model side of things and really nailing the domain model and the data model up front. Most of the frustrations you'll find in a kind of long-running software project or that you mistook the domain model up front, and you've then learned through painful kind of code missteps that you mistook that domain model, and then you wind up having to write very complicated code or pay a refactor tax to correct for it later.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of complexity is born from a misunderstanding of the core domain model up front, so you don't lay down the initial kind of core data model you need properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to really understand that clearly up front. So I'd say just some good practices around how to think about data modeling and kind of storage structures and things like that. Those are some great skills to start with.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I know we're running out of time. Do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah, about 5 more minutes.
Awesome. I just have one final question for you. What is the future bringing for us? Like if I'm a data scientist or I want to be a data scientist, what is something that I should look out for in this space of data engineering, data product development? What are some of the things that are coming in the next 3 or 5 years?
Wow. I think you're going to see more work in or more tools that like democratize AI and machine learning in some sense. And that sounds like a soundbite that everybody's saying. But the idea that some of the really difficult parts of data science will be subjected to tooling builds and kind of auto generation abilities, where some of the entry level, the simpler data science tasks, the kind of clustering tasks and the sort of simple predictive model training type stuff. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing those things. And as it becomes a little bit more commonplace, a little bit more simple, the tools have improved quite a bit. And so things that used to be in the domain of data scientists only or applied math people only will begin to be tenable or accessible to a data engineer or someone who's DevOps familiar. DevOps will expand into ML ops, right? And as that stuff becomes better supported with intuitive tooling and training, more engineers will be able to take advantage of it with less understanding of the math.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And so I think those are things that are coming. I would argue that with great power comes the ability to mess things up epically. And so in that tooling generation, we're trying to continue to invest in upskilling our folks on the math side, just because I don't think you'll be able to do it. You'll be able to turn something on, but you won't understand the why. You won't understand what it's actually doing. And I think people will, in some sense, like misuse some of the learning models that are out there or the tooling that is afforded to them, because they won't understand the inherent deficiencies or kind of carve outs of like, hey, don't do it this, or don't use it for this kind of data set, or don't make this kind of prediction. I think as the tools move people away from the math, then the understanding gaps will grow, and kind of the ability to make missteps with more powerful tools will increase. So I would just say, like, while the tools make your life easier, still invest in the data science learning paths and really understanding what you're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Art. Great note to end on. Really appreciate your time here.
Sure.
Can you please tell us where our audience can find you, follow you, or learn more about Elephant Ventures?
Yeah, elephantventures.com, or if you're fancy, elephant.ventures.
Awesome. Gotcha. And it's okay to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Art. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, Kirill.
So there you have it, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today and spending this hour with us. And it was interesting how, for me, I found it interesting how it took me some time to develop, to absorb all that information and to understand the importance of what Art was sharing and put it all into more or less coherent picture in my mind, and then it clicked. So I hope it clicked for you as well, and maybe even sooner than for me. My favorite part in addition to all the things I learned and how what is data engineering, data product development, how it ties in with data pipelines, why it's important to have this rapid process of innovation and cut it down from 9 months to 90 days. In addition to all those things, my favorite part was how Art kept repeating that clarity of purpose and capturing value through data are important. It's important to have that clarity of why we're doing it, to narrow down that cone of reality dispersion. Like even on this podcast, he repeated that probably like 2, 3, maybe 4 times. I can just imagine how when he's doing a project for a client, he constantly repeats that to whether it's executive level, to the people on the ground, the data scientists, everybody in the business, data custodians, how he constantly repeats this data value. How are you getting value out of this data? What kind of value you're driving? Because if you have that in mind, it really makes conversations easier. So it's almost like a subliminal message that just travels across his work. I can imagine it that way. And I'm grateful for him showing, like reminding us on this podcast that data, like deriving value out of data is important. If you prioritize that, if you think about, all right, what is the North Star, that will reduce the eventualities the quantity of eventualities that you have to be prepared for as a data engineer or data product developer, and that speeds up your process. It's a very cool way he put that into this equation. So that was my favorite part. I'm sure you have lots of great takeaways from here as well. And as always, you can find the show notes at superdatascience.com/417. That's superdatascience.com/417, where you'll find any materials we mentioned on this episode, the transcript, plus the URL to Art's LinkedIn and Elephant Ventures. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you know somebody who's into data engineering or data product development, or is looking to transition from just product development into data product development, or looking to transition from DevOps into data operations or into data engineering, send them this podcast. It might help them understand what this space is all about and how it is different to what they're currently doing. Very easy to share. Just send them the link, superdatascience.com/417. And that's us for today. I look forward to seeing you back here next time. Until then, happy analyzing.